Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Tea and Overtones. This is where we take a particular tea and examine it and talk about it, but more importantly, we talk about an aspect of the harmonic self as we're brewing a cup. Today's setup for tea couldn't be more simple. But before I talk about it, how did I get here? I think always I've been interested in tea. Just as a young lad growing up in England, it was always about having a cup of tea. Had a cup of tea for everything. I mean, my mother must have drunk 6 or 7 cups of tea a day, and it was very much a part of life. So I learned how to make a cup of tea, a lovely cup of tea. In the early days, there were no tea bags, of course, and when we first encountered tea bags was actually on a trip to Belgium. I remember a holiday with my parents. Maybe I was 10 or 11 years old, and they gave us tea bags, and we kind of just laughed. We just thought it was the most tea bags. I mean, what are these? Because we're used to kind of just, putting a spoon of teas into a teapot, and always a little extra, one for the pot, we used to say, and then brewing the tea. So in its own way, English tea has its own little tea ceremony, just with the cup, the milk, the porcelain teacup and saucer, the little drop of milk, little spoonful of sugar. Those kind of things make the color of the tea, and I learned to kind of discern the color of the tea as to how it was going to taste. So I kind of grew up with tea a lot, and then it kind of fed into the background when I moved to the United States, and coffee took primacy. And I've been back and forth over the years, and my trips to Japan, of course, got me interested in tea again, the tea ceremony or chado, which we've spoken about. And but then I did get the coffee bug, particularly with cold brew coffee, and I've really enjoyed cold brew coffee, particularly with oat milk. So that's really what was my beverage of choice. Well, this pandemic threw me back into the world of tea because I could no longer get my cold brew tea that I really liked. I like a particular brand. One gets fussy about these things. Of course, one can always brew cold brew coffee at home, but I like the convenience of just being able to pour it out of the refrigerator. Cold brew because it's less acidic. It seems to sit well with the stomach and seems to be very tasty. And healthy if it's organic, very healthy, funnily enough. And with oat milk. Well, I don't know what's happened to the oat milk world, but you cannot get oat milk. I mean, it's just been a run on oat milk during this pandemic. So it threw me back into the world of tea, and I've been delighted. Oh my goodness, it so ties in well with the harmonic self. The kind of the ritual of it, the specialness of it, the leaves, the taste, the brewing, the whole experience. I've just absolutely loved. So I've been very, very grateful. And just using all the tea that I have, which it turned out is a lot. So back to the tea again. I was given these gifts maybe over a year ago. And part of these tea and overtones is me opening these gifts for the first time. And the tea I want to kind of feature today, which was a gift I've never opened before, is actually what's called a blossoming tea. Blossoming tea, never really understood this. You actually put it apparently in the cup or the pot, and I'm going to use a glass teacup. It just becomes like a garden. And I never quite understood how that possibly grew on trees. And the answer is it doesn't. It's actually constructed, I think, with some thread, and they put some, in this case, silver needle tea, which is a white tea. And they put the silver needle tea with marigold flowers and also something called globe amaranth flower. So there's flowers in here. We're actually going to be brewing flowers. So let's just open this up for the first time. It's in a tube. I had to actually look it up online. I didn't know how to brew it or what exactly it was. And it's from someone called Ron Teagarden, who actually specializes in Chinese herbs. So I would imagine it's pretty healthy as it came from him. I didn't see that it says organic on it, and as you know, I'm a purist about it because tea has that ability to suck up toxins in the ground and in the environment. It kind of is one of those plants, which is great for clearing the environment, but you don't necessarily want all of that in your body. So very important where the tea comes from. Not so sure in this case, but I'm taking a chance. Opening up here. Unusual that it came in this kind of little test tube kind of approaches, but I guess it was all part of the gift and the approach. And so let's just take out one here. And that was lucky. I thought I was going to have to, as you've been making a bit of a fool of myself opening some of these things. So it comes in this little ball. Hope you can see that. In the past, I've been putting things in front of the camera and nobody's been able to see what I'm doing. So that's it. We'll put it in front of the gong there. That's what it looks like. It's just this little ball. We just plonk it in there. I'm sure there's probably a correct way to put it, but it's not. Doesn't look like there's a base. And what we'll do is open it up and we'll just pour in the water. Didn't really have any brewing instructions. I kind of looked it up online and all I could really see was that it said brew for 4 or 5 minutes, which I'm going to do here. And just put that down. And as you can see, it's floating to the top. I would imagine that that needs to sink a little bit as it kind of absorbs the water. So we'll see how that goes. Let that sit for 4 or 5 minutes. There's plenty of time for us to have a little chat about these kind of concepts of the harmonic self. And the one that fascinates me most is the actual silence. The Claude Debussy, I think I'm pronouncing that right, French composer, impressionist composer, just gorgeous music. Clair de Lune was one of his pieces. Claude Debussy said that music is the silence between the notes. And I may have mentioned that before, but it's just like, whoa, the silence between the notes. And there was a great piano teacher, I believe, a master piano teacher called Sophia Rosoff, I believe. And she kind of emphasized the silence between the notes more than the notes themselves. It was almost like the notes were just the vehicle through which the silence could appear. Now, I just did a piece on one of the writing the sound pieces on the tempura and the shruti box. We did the voice, the finding the sa, a piece that for you to explore. You'll know it because I'm kind of wearing the same clothes. I just did it a few minutes ago. And in that piece, after I've played the tempura, I do the shruti box first and then I play the tempura. Oh, by the way, this, as you can see, is opening up and a little bit of color is coming in and it's opening up. I mean, the idea is a little garden is beginning to appear here. So we'll see how that goes. As I finished the tempura, first of all I did the shruti box and then I did the tempura. And as I did the tempura, it ended and it was the quality of the silence was absolutely gorgeous. The quality of the silence. So you think that silence is this blank sheet, right? There's just silence. But from my experience, and I've learned this from teachers, Harmonic Guests is another section of the Harmonic Self channel, which is worth checking out. Gradually we'll be building up. But from the Harmonic Guests, I've learned that actually silence is multifaceted. There's different silences. And you can kind of see this really, it makes sense. If someone gets really upset and they storm out of the room, maybe it's a meeting, there's this kind of quality of silence, but the silence is not necessarily a nice silence. It's kind of got this quality of almost tension. It's silent. They've stormed out of the room. As opposed to a piece of music that is quite sacred and leaves behind it a silence of sacredness. This really fascinates me. And And again, this quote from Paul Horn, which I've talked about, that healing is the space between the notes, kind of the silence between the notes. He talks about the space between the notes. And I think that once that silence is present, we can enter that space and healing can take place. I think that's tremendous potential for us. We're so focused on the notes themselves. Does it sound good? Even our voice. But really, in terms of our voice, what is the quality that we leave behind? Oh goodness, this is really quite a little garden now. You can see that it's almost found its own level. I didn't need to actually place it in any way. Hope you can see that. There's a nice little garden there. And you can see, this is the first time I'm doing any of this. It's actually quite spectacular in its own way. And believe it or not, I'm actually going to drink this now. That's quite interesting. It has a kind of a sweetness to it, which is a surprise. We've got the marigold flowers and we've got the globe amaranth, whatever that is. And the silver needle, it doesn't quite taste like silver needle. Of course, the silver needle here, but I'm not quite having that silver needle quality. However, probably the silver needle blending with these other elements. It's called double happiness, by the way. That was the name of the tea. Provides actually quite a very interesting complexity with a little bit of a hint of sweetness. All around very present, not too strong, even though it's been brewing for quite a while, not bitter at all. And again, we've got this beautiful flower, this garden that's unfurled in my teacup. So when we're doing tea or taking a break for tea, I think it's very important that we realize that this silence is something we can enter into this space, and that when we do so, healing takes place. Now, how does that apply? We appreciate the tea. We enjoy the smell of the tea, the aroma of the tea, the fragrance of the tea. We allow ourselves to taste the tea, not just chug it down. I think that's really the important point here. But just like in the music, Claude Debussy saying that the music is the silence between the notes, maybe the quality, the most important thing here, is the space between sips. What quality does it leave behind? Maybe the taste. And then what's the moment that's left behind? I think that's really vital. And also, of course, I'm talking up a storm here, but if I just take a moment to pause, everything changes. It's interesting how we're uncomfortable with silence, particularly when we're with friends. For the most part, there's probably many people that enjoy the silence, but for the most part, we want to fill that space. And perhaps the real love, the real friendship, the real communication happens between the words, all in the space between. But we need the words, we need the sips, we need the notes to lead us into that silence, into that stillness, and into that space. Until the next time, Berush Beishan. which for people new to tea and overtones means the blessings already are. The blessings already are. So just choose a blessing for yourself and enter into the space of that blessing for the highest good. Beirut Beishan.